Good morning. I want to say a special good morning to the people on this side of the room. I can only go this far, so I'll try and say hi. My name is Matt Lawson. I am the Director of Performance Marketing at Google. And I've spent the last year studying some of our most successful advertisers and their characteristics. And I can tell you with certainty that there's a shift happening in digital right now. Some of our smartest marketers are changing the KPIs that they use. They're changing the way that they test. They're changing the way that they think about growth. And we're calling these marketers profit-driven. I'm going to share with you some of the things that they do today to be more successful and some examples of what these clients are actually doing and who they are. But before we do that, I want to start with the fun story. So these gentlemen are a group of nail factory workers in Russia at the turn of the last century. Now, after the Bolshevik Revolution, as you all know, the government took control of all of the industry. And they set the quotas and the KPIs and the measurements. And so these particular gentlemen made fasteners in the service of their country. And the Politburo decided that they should target a certain weight of fasteners or nails, right? And so as you could imagine, these guys were smart folks, right? They said, if our quota is weight, what are we going to do? Well, they created huge nails that were probably only useful for driving spikes into railroads, but certainly not useful for carpentry or anything like that. So the government, in realizing that they had the wrong target, said, let's change things up. Instead, we'll have a quantity target. We'll ask people to generate a certain number of nails, not a certain weight. So you can imagine what happened, right? They switched from creating big nails to lots and lots of little nails. Again, not terribly useful for carpentry, maybe useful as thumbtacks. So you have to wonder, did these guys go to the bar after work, knock back some vodkas and say, comrades, we crushed our target? Or were there a couple of them in the corner saying, wait a second, maybe, just maybe, instead of making all these little nails, we should make a few regular-sized nails that people in the village could actually use? Well, I find this story instructive for a reason, because the targets that we set have a huge impact on the outcomes that we get. And we're all leaders within this group. Some of you work directly in the AdWords tool. Some of you manage an agency. Some of you manage a team of people who run AdWords. And the targets that you set are extremely important to the outcomes that you drive. So let's take a look at how important that can be with a really simple example. So it's a fairly simple question. Which advertiser is doing better? Advertiser A has a $50 cost per acquisition and a 20-to-1 return on advertising investment. Advertiser B has a $100 cost per acquisition and a 10-to-1 return on investment. How many people think advertiser A is doing better? How many people think advertiser B is doing better? How many people are afraid to answer because I just told a story about measurement? I'll give you one more option. How many people think it depends and you don't have all the information? There you go. So we've got a lot of sharp folks in this room. So the answer is it does depend, right? What does it depend on? Well, let's take a look. So if advertiser A is getting 10 conversions at a $10,000 gross per conversion and spending $500 to do that, their CPA is $50 and their ROI is 20-to-1, right? Now let's say advertiser B generates 30 conversions at the exact same margin for a $30,000 gross margin and a $3,000 SEM investment. If we look at our cost per acquisition, it's certainly worse. And if we look at our return on investment, it's also worse. But what happens if instead of dividing, we subtract the SEM investment from the gross margin? We get a number which is profits. And on a profits basis, advertiser B is actually doing much better. So the key insight here is that when we look at an efficiency metric like CPA, ROI, ROAS, these metrics don't take into account one important point, which is volume. Only profit can help us balance the trade-off between volume and efficiency. And this is the key insight that our profit-driven marketers look to exploit for their own success. So let's talk through what are the things that they do to be successful. And I'm going to talk through three different areas, three different concepts that really drive this home. Profit-driven marketers recognize value across all of their different conversion types, across the lifetime value of the customer, and they factor that fully into how they bid, not just looking at a simple CPA or revenue number from their online commerce. They target specific outcomes in the auction. So they're very cognizant of what slot they're in. Are they in the top position? Are they in the right rail? How does that impact volume and efficiency? And they capture all of the available demand that's profitable. So let's talk through each of these in turn, and we'll start with recognizing value. Now, if you're like me, you probably get 1 or 2 catalogs every week, right? And if you're like me, you probably walk straight towards the trash to throw those catalogs away. But if you have a wife like mine, she stops me every time and says, no, I want to read the catalogs. She'll flip through any catalog, Bloomingdale's, Macy's, JCPenney's, Victoria's Secret. In 5 years of marriage, I have never seen her, after flipping through a catalog, turn to the back, call the phone number, and place an order. So in my mind, these catalogs must be worthless, right? In fact, this must be a dying industry. And I'm sure many of you as retailers have catalogs. And those of you who could probably tell me that last year, catalogers sent over 19 billion catalogs to consumers, 5% more than the year before. Instead of a dying business, this is a growing business. And the question is why? Well, it's true that most sales from catalogs don't happen direct, but catalogers measure the impact when a catalog drops on online sales and offline sales. And they factor that into their models about how profitable that catalog is. In digital, we've been spoiled, right? Since the beginning, we've been able to say this click drove this sale in our online site. And we've used that to justify all of our search investments. But it's increasingly critical, especially in a competitive environment, that you factor in the value of all of your conversions, not just your online conversions. And let me show you how profit-driven marketers think about this. So if we look at the right here, if you've got an advertiser with a baseline cost per sale of $80, a CPC of $6, and a total of 16 sales. If we know, for example, that for every 4 online sales, we generate 1 additional offline sale, that's a 1.25 multiplier from online to offline. And a profit-driven marketer understanding that will say, based on this, I'm going to just increase my sales number in my spreadsheet to 20 from 16. But the key is they don't stop there, right? They use this insight to push their bids back up to their original cost per sale target. And as they do, they increase the number of sales they get both online and offline. Now, this is fuzzy, right? We don't know exactly how many offline sales we're generating. Certainly Google and others will try and help you. But what's important is that you try to estimate it. that you build a conservative estimate, that you get buy-in from your management, and that you start factoring concepts like this into how you think about profits. An advertiser who's doing a great job of this is Auto-By-Tel. Auto-By-Tel is a company that matches people who are looking for a car with dealers who are looking to buy leads. When we started working with Auto-By-Tel 2 years ago, they were originally bidding to a very basic cost per acquisition metric. But over time, they shifted to a profit formula for their account, and then as they got better and better about bidding to profits, they got better and better at measuring profits. Today, instead of just using an assumed CPA, Auto-By-Tel will actually import their data from their customer relationship management systems into AdWords, so they can understand profitability at the campaign, ad group, even the keyword level. And this allows them to do some very smart things, like bid more for customers in certain locations where there's multiple dealerships waiting to bid on that lead. Those are the locations that are more profitable for them, and that allows them to be more competitive in those auctions. Let's talk about targeting specific outcomes in the auction. And I think a good analogy here is the grocery store. How many people here have heard of the digital shelf? This is a favorite of Google's. So this is your average grocery store shelf. The average grocery store has just over 40,000 items in it. So it's very hard, very difficult for brands to get their products recognized, very difficult for brands to get their products to stand out, especially if you sell canned tuna. So what do brands do? They pay, right? They pay to place their products at eye level on the shelves and on the end caps, because that's the premium real estate where people are most likely to pick it up and buy it. And digital is no different, right? In our search results, we have ads on the top and the right on desktop, and on mobile on the top and the bottom. And as you guys all know, the clicks on the top are more expensive than the ones on the right or the bottom, right? Makes sense to pay a premium for that placement. But the key thing to understand here is the insight that profit-driven marketers know about, which is the ads on the top actually get a majority of the clicks, right? So if the difference between the cost of the right and the top is small enough, and the added volume that you get on the top is high enough, sometimes the growth in volume outstrips the additional cost it takes to allow you to increase your gross profit. A retailer that understands how to do this very well is Beyond the Rack. Beyond the Rack is a women's apparel and fashion retailer, and Richard is their director. Started working with us in the last recession. What was interesting was their company's growth and their digital growth had stalled out. And it's because they were largely targeting a very specific CPA and just optimizing down to that. When they began working with us, they used this insight to test higher positions in the auction. They looked at their keywords and ad groups that were in positions 3 and 4 and 5 and questioned, what if we get into just a little bit higher position? Will the increase in volume help offset the increase in costs? And the results were tremendous. They were able to grow revenues by 600% in just a 4-month period for digital. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper into how they did this when we talk about implementation tactics. The final concept to understand here is that profit-driven marketers capture all of the available demand that's profitable, right? And this sounds like a simple concept, but imagine, many of you are retailers with an online presence, but some of you probably have an offline presence as well. Imagine going to the store on a busy Saturday to pick up an item or some clothing and finding the store closed, right? This happens in digital constantly when people are searching for your products and specifically for your brands, oftentimes your ads aren't available. And so the question is, why does this happen, right? Why would some people miss out on the opportunity to be there in front of customers when they're interested? So we took a look at this. And this is a real example with two clients from a similar industry. It may be hard to see, but the gray shaded area here represents consumer demand, or the total number of queries for products in this category. We have two advertisers, the leader on top and the laggard on bottom. And you can see that over time, the category leader's impressions very closely mimics consumer demand. They're there for almost every impression that's available, which, by the way, is very easy to do at any budget. Even if you have a fixed budget, you can always bid down to get more coverage. But the laggard is much more interesting. As consumer demand spikes and falls, they're more erratic, spiking up in February and March, spiking down in June and July, and at points not being there when as many as 4 out of every 10 consumers are looking for their products. This is a huge missed opportunity. And the question is why? Well, as it turns out, the way that the category laggard budgets is not specific to digital or to search. They set their search budgets as a percentage of their television budgets. And as a result, when they heavy up on television in the spring and the fall, their search campaigns map very well to consumer demand. But when their TV ads are off in the winter and the summer, they miss out. And this comes down to mindsets, right? For the laggard, they have a fixed budget or a percentage of ad spend budget, and as a result, they focus on efficiency. Because we only have a certain amount, let's make that amount as efficient as possible. But for the category leader, the profit-driven marketer, they're flexible with their budgets. They're willing to spend more if they can do it profitably, and they'll throttle down if consumers aren't searching. But most importantly, they have a mindset of growth. And I'll give you an example of someone who's doing this extremely well, which is Airbnb. So I don't know if you are familiar with Airbnb, but this is a hospitality company. They match people looking for rooms with people willing to rent space in their house or apartment. Airbnb was founded in 2009 and grew quickly in the United States. And their marketing team was empowered. They were empowered to spend as much as they could profitably without a fixed budget or any constraints. And so what's interesting is the behaviors when you enable people in that way. In 2012, just 3 years after the company founded, the marketing team came to their senior leadership with an opportunity and a challenge. They realized that there were massive opportunities to grow their profits overseas. In fact, they had done some tests with the traffic. It converted well. They said, this is a huge opportunity for us to grow. There was a problem, though. The company wasn't set up to manage overseas. It didn't have localized websites, localized legal language, didn't have call centers overseas. So the marketing team, rather than take no for an answer, said, okay, we'll justify this. They built a model of profitability and how much revenue that marketing could drive for the company. They built the business case and took it to their senior leadership, and they took it to their board and got an expansion plan approved. Today, Airbnb operates in 165 countries worldwide, including Brazil. This is the kind of outcome that you get when you empower your teams to think about growth and profits first, as opposed to just doing the best that you can with a fixed budget. So, how do we make it happen, right? You understand the concepts. What are some actionable ways that you guys can get started with becoming a profit-driven marketer today? The first and most important step is to define your profit formula. Now, this varies by industry, but we have a retail example here, which should be pretty straightforward. You know how many visits you get. You know your online conversion rate. You want to add in some kind of offline multiplier to understand how many total new sales you're generating. You have to multiply that by the lifetime value of these customers that you're acquiring. You know what an average sale is worth, but how many of those get generated over the course of 2 or 3 years? What's the gross margin on those sales? Most importantly, when people buy from you and have a great experience, do they tell their friends about it? Do they refer people? If so, think about adding in a referral multiplier. The last step here, don't divide. Subtract your AdWords investment from the customer value that you're generating to get your total profits. Now I know you guys probably have a lot of questions on this. First question I would ask is, wait a second, some of these numbers aren't in Google Analytics. We know. The reality is, when you think about it, when you think about the playing field, everyone has the same AdWords interface or the same Google Analytics interface. What's unique, what sets you apart, is the data that you have in your own e-commerce systems and your CRM systems. Use it to your advantage. If you've ever been outbid by one of your competitors who has a very similar business model, very similar economics to you, chances are you were outbid because they had a better understanding of their own profit formula for digital. I know you're probably also saying, wait a second, a 4x offline multiplier, that's crazy. Maybe it is. In the US, Macy's says they generate anywhere from 5 to 7 offline sales for every online sale. But if this number is too high for you, pick a different number. Pick a number like 2 or 1.25 or 1.5. Pick something that's conservative enough that everyone in your company will agree. Because what's important is not the number that you choose, but the fact that you incorporate this into your profit formula and get credit for those offline sales. And over time, as you get better at optimizing the profits, you'll find better ways to measure and estimate. And your estimates will improve over time. We've seen this happen with a number of advertisers, and it will happen with you as well. The second most important thing to do, once you've got your profit formula, is to optimize your digital storefront. If you think about the formula as how you're going to measure profits, think of your storefront as the machine that all profits flow through, right? And Sean talked about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We've got a lot of best practices for you that you can learn more about on how to optimize for multi-screen. But several things are certain. One is consumer expectations have changed, specifically as it relates to search, and especially on mobile. You have to make your search experiences prominent. Search has to work. People have to be able to filter quickly and easily. When you start thinking about checkout, think about making the process as simple as you possibly can. Eliminate fields that aren't necessary in your forms. Label your forms clearly, and do data validation in real time so that people don't have to resubmit in the checkout. One of the things that can help you is allowing users to purchase as a guest. A lot of people don't want to fill out a lengthy loyalty form enrollment when they could simply get through with an anonymous transaction. Leave the sign up for your loyalty programs at the end as an option. And finally, you want to make sure that it's easy to convert across devices. So when someone's in your cart or in your checkout flow, especially if they're on mobile, make it easy for them to email themselves those products or post it to their Instagram or Facebook so they can come back and purchase on a desktop or laptop later. Once you have your formula, once you've optimized your profit machine, it's time to start testing bids, right? And we hinted at how Beyond the Rack did this, but it's instructive to understand it in detail. If you look at any reasonable set of curves, as your cost per acquisition increases on the x-axis, your revenue will initially increase dramatically, and as you begin to reach the top slot, it will level off over time. And as a result, your profits can spike even more dramatically early on, and then peak before falling as your cost per acquisition increases faster than your volume. Now the goal is to be somewhere near the top here, and the question is, how do you do that? Well, for a profit-driven marketer, it's easy. We take a look at the ads that aren't in top positions, the ones in 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And from there, we bid up. You increase bids by 20 to 30%, wait 2 to 3 weeks, and see what the results are. For some keywords, you're going to see a dramatic spike in volume for a small cost offset, and your profits will rise. Those are the ones we keep. For other keywords, you'll find that the increase in volume isn't enough to offset the increase in costs. And for those, we'll pull our CPA back down. Now, the question I always get when presenting this is, how do we get to the absolute top? How do we reach the peak of the curve? And the answer is you never will. You never will for 2 reasons. One, consumer behavior and demand is changing. It can spike and fall. Conversion rates can change as your website interactions change. And second, your competition is changing. Your competition is changing their bids, their consumer experiences, their product offerings. So this curve is constantly shifting. So you need to think about having a testing mentality and a testing mindset, not a mindset of we'll reach this peak and then move on to the next test. Once you understand how to test, the key is stepping on the gas, building a growth mindset into your organization. What's different about profit-driven marketers is not just that they test, but they test more, faster, at scale. And as a result, they're able to find the profitable opportunities quicker than their competition. Now, there's a cost to this, right? And that you have to be comfortable with wild swings in your CPA. When we go back to the example of Richard at Beyond the Rack, they increased the number of customers they had per week dramatically in just 4 months. But there was a moment where their CPAs spiked through the roof, and Richard certainly called us and said, what is going on? What do we do? Our CPAs are 3 to 4x what they've ever been. And the reason this happened is because we were taking entire campaigns and increasing bids by 20 to 30%. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, looking at the results and throttling back on the keywords that didn't work. When you think about this, this is like, searching for oil. And you'll strike it with a certain number of keywords, and in other places, your drilling efforts will fall short. But the mindset here is one of testing more faster, and that enables you to identify opportunities quicker than the competition. The last point I'll leave you with is don't over-optimize. As search marketers, we have a tendency to look for certainty, for mathematics, to multiply 2 numbers together and call it a CPA and say, we're going to hit this number for every single keyword or every single type of media in our account. And the reality is the practice of AdWords is actually more of an art than a science. For all of your keywords, you'll have different CPAs within your account. For all of your media types, some will have a higher CPA than others. Display, for example, may have a higher CPA than search, or your category terms may have a higher CPA than your branded terms. The reality is some of these upper funnel media and terms influence downstream conversions. So as you test either higher positions or as you consider turning certain keywords and media off, make sure to watch the impact or the influence that that has on downstream branded searches and conversions through direct type in. You're not always going to be able to measure the full impact of all of these media, so you have to get comfortable with averaging out your CPA across your account as opposed to having everything in your account hit a very specific CPA. So those are the 5 tactics that I have for you for becoming profit-driven. And if I could leave you with one thought, it's this. Ask yourself, what kind of account do I want to grow? Do I want to grow a beautiful bonsai tree or a mighty sequoia? The bonsai tree comes through constant pruning, cutting it back until it's shaped exactly the way we want it to. And if you target an efficiency metric, you will nail your CPA goal. The question is, will you have the volume, and will you have achieved the objectives you wanted to? The sequoia grows and grows and grows, and we can prune it whenever we want to. And for the profit-driven marketer, growth comes first. We look to test and grow, and then after reaching a new plateau, we prune some of the branches that didn't work. For our advertisers, we've seen great success with profit-driven marketing, and I hope that you will too. We have some resources on our Think site available where you can learn more. And if there's any time, I'm happy to take a question or two. Thank you.